Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're turning inwards. We're not looking at, external events, but something much closer to home. We're diving into the architecture of your own psyche. That complex hidden structure inside that, keeps you running, often in ways you don't even realize.
It's quite a journey, isn't it? Moving away from the outside world to these internal forces that really shape how you react to everything. And the idea we really need to start with, I think, is this. You're not broken. You're just brilliantly defended.
I really like that framing. Brilliantly defended. But that's the tricky part, right? These brilliant defenses, the way we deflect or suddenly can't remember something or avoid certain topics they were originally built for survival. So why do they end up feeling like prisons later on?
That is the absolute core paradox. These defenses, they really are masterpieces of, let's say, psychic engineering. They were crucial when you were little, absolutely essential for protecting you in situations where maybe telling the truth felt dangerous or being vulnerable. Well, that cost you something important like love or safety. But the defense that worked for the child, that saved the child, now kind of isolates the adult. It's like a fortress built for a war that ended long ago, but you're still living inside it.
Right, like the system is running on old, outdated software.
Yeah.
So to understand how this whole system operates, we probably need to look at that internal conflict.
Yeah.
You hear terms like id, ego, superego. They get thrown around a lot. How do they actually play into building these defenses?
Okay, so imagine it like a constant internal drama, a theater of conflict playing out inside. The id is like the raw engine. Pure desire, libido, wanting connection, pleasure. No, it doesn't really think about consequences. Then you have the superego. That's the harsh inner judge, full of shoulds and shouldn'ts, prohibitions, often quite critical, maybe echoes of parents or society. And caught in the middle is the poor ego. It's the crisis manager, the negotiator. Its main job is just to keep the whole show running, to keep the structure from collapsing under all that pressure and conflict.
So the ego isn't really aiming for moral perfection, necessarily. It's more about just getting through the day, surviving the immediate conflict. By any means necessary, you might say.
Exactly. Survival first. And the most fundamental tool the ego uses for this is repression. This is the cornerstone, really, of all defenses. And it's important to distinguish it from conscious suppression, like when you decide not to think about something for a while. Repression is different. It's an unconscious act of erasure. A feeling, a memory, a desire that the ego deems too threatening, too dangerous, just gets pushed down, out of awareness. That's why sometimes if you're asked about something painful from the past, you get that fog, that blankness. You genuinely feel like, I don't remember, or no, really, I'm over it.
But here's the key point, isn't it? Repression doesn't actually delete the file. It just encrypts it, hides it away somewhere deep.
Precisely. It's like locking a dangerous prisoner in the basement, but forgetting they're still down there, consuming resources, rattling the pipes. The forbidden thought, the feeling, it sinks down, but it holds on to its energy because, the body doesn't forget. The emotional charge is still there. And this is why repressed material often comes back, but in disguise. It might return as a physical symptom, that mysterious back pain the doctors can't explain. That could be psychic distress manifesting physically. Or it shows up in dreams, nightmares, maybe, or in those classic slips of the tongue. You mean to say, I'm so glad you're here, but what slips out is, I'm so mad you're here? Oops, the repression just failed for a split second.
That idea of the body remembering the physical truth.
Yeah.
That's really powerful.
Yeah.
To help visualize this whole psychic structure, let's use that common analogy. The mind as an old house. How does that work?
Yes, the house analogy. It's quite helpful, I find. So think of the conscious mind as the parlor, the front room. It's brightly lit, presentable. It's where you entertain guests, where you manage your day-to-day thoughts and interactions, the self you show the world. The pre-conscious is maybe the hallway just off the parlor. It holds things you're not thinking about right now, but you could access easily if you needed to, like remembering what you had for breakfast or someone's name. You just have to, walk down the hall mentally and grab it.
Okay, parlor, hallway.
Yeah.
But the real drama, the source of all this repressed stuff, is elsewhere, right?
Exactly. The real action, the source of the defenses, is often in the unconscious. That's the basement. Maybe the locked attic, too. Dark corners, hidden spaces. This is where the exiled parts of you live. The forbidden desires, the deep shames, the primal fears, the experience is too painful to keep in the parlor. And the defenses. There are the locks on the doors, the thick walls, the soundproofing. They're designed to keep the residents of the basement and attic quiet, to stop them from bursting into the parlor and disrupting everything.
And so many of our adult patterns, the ways we live and relate, are dictated by the needs or the fears of those ghosts living downstairs. Can we trace how a pattern like that might start, maybe with an example?
Let's take a kind of generalized example. Call her Anna. Imagine Anna as a little girl, maybe 5 years old. She's naturally bubbly, full of life, excited about something. She runs to her main caregiver, her mom, her dad, bursting with a story, or maybe needing some comfort, some connection. But the caregiver, maybe they're stressed, overwhelmed, depressed themselves. They wave her away, maybe sharply. Not now, Anna. Can't you see I'm busy? Go play quietly.
Oof. So in that moment, Anna's natural joy, her core need for attention and connection, it isn't met with warmth. It's met with rejection, pain.
Yes, and her little psyche has to make sense of that instantly. The raw truth, the person I depend on for my very survival, finds my true self, my needs, unwelcome or burdensome. That realization is just too devastating for a child's ego to handle. So what does it do? It represses the hurt, the anger, maybe even the joy itself because it led to rejection. And it constructs a defense. It creates quiet Anna, the good girl, the one who doesn't make waves, doesn't interrupt, is always agreeable. That feels safer.
And the long-term consequence. Fast forward 20, 30 years, Anna might be the adult who struggles in relationships. She might be seen as passive or detached. Her partners might leave, complaining she lacks passion or that they don't feel truly connected to her. She becomes the ghost partner.
Exactly. Her childhood survival strategy has now become her adult relational pattern, her identity almost. The defense, built for pure survival back then, now actively prevents her from getting the connection she still deeply craves. But the unconscious, it doesn't just stay silent. It keeps trying to communicate that original wound, often through symptoms. This is so important. We need to reframe symptoms. They aren't just malfunctions or random problems. They are like coded messages, letters sent up from the basement.
So that chronic shoulder pain that never quite goes away, even though the x-rays are clear, maybe that's the weight of an old emotional burden she's still carrying, literally. Or the sudden panic attack that hits just before a big presentation or a promotion. Maybe that's the 5-year-old inside screaming, wait, being visible is dangerous. Success means exposure, and exposure leads to rejection.
Precisely. It's the past erupting into the present. And we also see this so clearly in what psychoanalysts call the repetition compulsion, or what you call the road of repetition. That awful feeling when you realize you keep choosing partners who are emotionally unavailable or bosses who undermine you, mirroring that original dynamic. That isn't just bad luck, it's the unconscious in a way trying to stage a do-over. It replays the original wounding scene again and again, almost hoping that this time the adult you will intervene, fix it, get the love or validation that was missing the first time around.
Wow. It's quite a sobering thought that we might be unconsciously engineering our own painful repetitions in a desperate attempt to heal the past. Okay, let's zoom in on the defenses themselves, the guards at the gate. We need to name them, understand how these specific strategies work.
Yes. Let's meet the guardians, treat them as specific strategies the ego employs. We can start with denial. Denial is, well, it's the loud liar. It doesn't just ignore the truth, it actively declares the truth to be false, often quite forcefully. It's the voice that says, no, it wasn't that bad, about something clearly traumatic, or insists, I'm perfectly fine, while clearly distressed. It's a way to avoid psychic collapse in the face of overwhelming reality.
Right, like hearing a really bad diagnosis and just refusing to believe it initially, it buys the ego some breathing room maybe.
Right.
But what if it becomes the default setting?
Well, that's the danger. If denial becomes habitual, like ignoring mounting bills or obvious problems in a relationship, the ego is sacrificing reality testing for short-term emotional comfort. It can be protective momentarily, but ultimately it's quite damaging if you can't move past it.
Okay, moving on to another really common one, and one that can cause a lot of interpersonal trouble. Projection. You called it the great deflector.
Projection. This happens when the ego finds an impulse or a feeling within itself totally unacceptable. Maybe intense anger or deep insecurity or a forbidden desire. It can't tolerate owning that feeling. So what does it do? It unconsciously projects it outward onto someone else. Suddenly you don't feel enraged, you feel that everyone around you is angry and hostile. Your own critical voice becomes the perception that others are constantly judging you.
Ah, so it's clever in a way. You get to sort of experience the feeling, vent it maybe, but without having to own it yourself. Your self-image stays intact because the problem is out there, not here.
Exactly. It neatly avoids the shame or guilt the superego might impose if you acknowledge the feeling as your own. Now, if projection pushes the feeling out, what about when the ego tries to manage an unacceptable feeling by smothering it with logic?
That sounds like rationalization. The intellectual alibi, you called it.
Yes, that's a good description. Rationalization is often the go-to defense for intelligent people. Perhaps those who learned early on that expressing feelings was messy or unacceptable, but having good reasons was always respected. The ego takes a painful emotional experience, maybe a rejection, a failure, a loss, and wraps it up in neat, logical-sounding explanations. It constructs an intellectual argument to avoid feeling the raw pain.
Like you get turned down for a job you really, really wanted, and instead of feeling the disappointment or inadequacy, you immediately start listing all the reasons why it's actually for the best. Well, I didn't really want that job anyway. The commute would have been a nightmare. The company culture probably wasn't a good fit. It's a blessing in disguise.
Precisely. All possibly true statements, but their function is to neutralize the painful feeling underneath. It's a sophisticated form of self-conception. Then there's reaction formation. This one is fascinating. It's like the double agent. The ego defends against a threatening impulse by forcefully adopting the opposite attitude or behavior.
This is where someone feeling, say, intense underlying hostility towards someone might act with exaggerated, almost sickeningly sweet kindness towards them. The intensity gives it away.
Yes, the rigidity and exaggeration are often the clues. Someone grappling with forbidden desires might become obsessively pious or puritanical. Someone struggling with aggressive feelings might become excessively gentle and solicitous. The sheer amount of energy poured into maintaining the opposite behavior often signals the strength of the repressed impulse it's trying to contain. And finally, there's one defense that Freud actually considered relatively healthy, or at least adaptive. Sublimation, the alchemist.
Right, this is where you take that raw energy, aggression, libido, difficult emotions, and channel it into something socially acceptable, even valuable.
Exactly. Sublimation doesn't just repress or disguise the ide's energy, it transforms it. It finds a constructive outlet. So the intense aggression that might otherwise be destructive could be channeled into the focus and drive of a surgeon, the discipline of an athlete, or the creative force of an artist or writer. The raw energy gets expressed, but in a way that society and the superego can actually approve of, even admire.
Okay, so we have denial, projection, rationalization, reaction formation, sublimation, all these complex strategies. And they all seem to come dramatically to life in the concept of transference, right? This is where the past really crashes into the present.
Transference is indeed where the rubber meets the road, you could say. It's where this whole internal architecture built in the past becomes vividly visible in your current relationships and interactions. Your unconscious essentially takes the blueprint of significant early relationships, especially with parents or primary caregivers, with all their associated feelings, expectations, and conflicts, and superimposes it onto people in your present life. A boss, a partner, a therapist, even a friend.
So that time you felt disproportionately furious or hurt by a relatively minor comment from your manager. That might not have really been about the manager at all. You weren't just reacting to their words. You were reacting to the ghost of, say, a critical parent whose disapproval felt devastating when you were small.
Precisely. The current situation acts as a trigger, activating that old wound, that old dynamic. You're suddenly relating to your boss as if they were that critical parent. The intensity of your reaction often belongs to the past, not the present moment. The present relationship becomes a kind of stage where the unconscious is trying again to replay and maybe finally resolve that old unfinished business. And the moment you can recognize that, wait a minute, this feeling feels way too big for this situation. Who does this really belong to? That awareness can be incredibly freeing.
That awareness, though, it sounds simple, but getting there is often met with fierce internal opposition. Before we wrap up, we absolutely have to talk about that final guard at the gate, resistance.
Resistance, yes. This is crucial. As you start to get closer to these defended, often painful core truths in therapy, or even just in self-reflection, your psyche will almost inevitably push back. Hard. And it's vital to understand resistance not just as stubbornness or opposition. It's actually a form of love. It's the psyche's fierce, protective love for its own survival based on past experience.
It's that internal part screaming, stop, don't go there. If you touch that feeling, if you open that door, something terrible will happen. We built these walls for a reason, and they kept us alive.
Exactly that. It's the voice that says, I have protected you from this pain for decades, and I am not going to let you dismantle my work now.
Okay.
That's why resistance often shows up not as a direct no, but maybe as suddenly feeling incredibly tired when the topic comes up. Or needing to intellectualize everything, dissect it clinically instead of feeling it. Or abruptly deciding, you know what, the psychoanalytic stuff is just jargon, it doesn't really apply to me.
The key is you cannot fight resistance head on. It will just dig its heels in harder. You have to approach it with respect, even gratitude. How do you do that? How do you honor a part of yourself that's actively stopping you from healing or growing?
You acknowledge its original protective intention. You metaphorically speak to that defensive part. You say, thank you, I see you, I understand. You built this wall to keep me safe back then, and you did an amazing job. You kept me alive. But the situation has changed now. I'm an adult. I have more resources. I can handle this now. I appreciate your service, but perhaps I've got it from here.
Healing isn't about instantly fixing the unconscious or solving it like some kind of crossword puzzle. It's a process. Freud called it Durcharbeitung, often translated as working through.
And working through, that's not like a one-time light bulb moment, is it?
Yeah.
It's more like revisiting the same difficult feelings, the same patterns again and again, but with growing awareness each time until they slowly lose their grip. Yes, exactly. It's the slow, often painful, repetitive process of encountering the repressed material, noticing the defenses as they arise in the moment, and gradually making them conscious. That sustained awareness, that patient act of noticing your own avoidance, your own patterns, without harsh judgment, that is the force that gradually dissolves the spell cast by the old survival architecture. It loosens the grip of the past.
So thinking about all this, where does it leave us? These defenses, they were necessary. They were brilliant adaptations, really, life-saving even. They're like historical artifacts within us. The invitation then isn't to violently tear down your defenses, but maybe to recognize them for what they are, relics of a past battle, and to realize that the child who built them is still in there, waiting not to be fixed, but maybe just to be seen, finally.
Beautifully put. Freedom begins, perhaps, when the ego can stop managing the conflict through deception and avoidance, and instead can simply bear witness to the internal truth with compassion.
So we'll leave you with this final thought to reflect on. Your defenses are likely active even now, listening to this. What defense might you be using right in this moment, perhaps, to distance yourself from the feelings or ideas we've discussed? Maybe denial, rationalization, maybe just a subtle intellectual distancing, just noticing that awareness of your own protective strategy in action, that quiet noticing, that itself is the beginning of freedom.